And when I announced I was retiring from tech and that I was going to teach yoga, people started coming, like just on LinkedIn from my past. One of my clients is somebody that I worked with 30 years ago at Xerox. I thought I'd have to start from scratch, but I have really great relationships with a bunch of people that I hadn't thought about.
Welcome to In Her Words. This podcast is for women navigating through change, career, identity, motherhood, and just figuring out what's next. I'm Roberta Dombrowski, host of In Her Words and founder of Learn Mindfully. Each episode, I sit down with women who are asking big questions, navigating transitions, and trying to make sense of life as it shifts. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need space to be real. Let's get into it. With me today, I have Carol Rossi. She offers private yoga instruction and spiritual direction grounded in over 35 years of yoga practice, a decade of dance training, and certification in both yoga and spiritual direction. Her work is shaped by over 20 years of contemplative study and centers on breath, presence, and accessibility. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to dive in today. I feel like we'll have a lot to chat about. But to kick us off, I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience in the tech space. You were previously a user researcher. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that part of your background.
Yeah. So, over the course of my career, I've sort of woven in and out of yoga and tech, and I actually started in tech in the 80s when it was not really a popular career, especially for women. And I started in human factors, which is sort of a precursor to what we call UX in some ways. And in other ways, it still continues as a way to do things like make airplanes safer for pilots and that kind of thing. But, I had this career and immediately went into work in mostly big enterprise companies at the time. And after I worked full time for like 7 or 8 years, I just became really disenchanted with corporate life and sort of trying to figure out what to do next. I had this epiphany. It happened to be on my 30th birthday, and I went into this period of kind of discernment and experimentation, and I ended up deciding to go back to school and get another master's degree this time in dance ethnology, which is kind of like anthropology of movement. And from there, I thought, well, I can get a PhD in anthropology and become an academic. That was kind of where my mind was because I thought teaching was in my future in some way. But, even doing that, I never really left tech behind because somebody at UCLA figured out she has this tech background. So my first graduate assistantship was running the computer lab in the dance department and teaching all the dancers to write papers in WordPerfect and use email in 1993 on these Mac Classics, which were the super boxy ones, and which was super fun. It really got me, it gave me a deep dive into teaching. And then after graduating from that MA program, I started teaching yoga in community colleges, and I also was teaching seniors how to use Windows 95 in like Beverly Hills Adult School. So that started this like dual path of I started doing usability studies for companies where my friends were working and they needed somebody to help them. And then I started getting my own clients. And at that point, also a little bit later, the commercial internet was taking off. And so in like 1998, I was looking for more consulting clients, and I ended up getting a full-time job at GeoCities, which at the time was this incredible online community. And I was the sole researcher there. It was a really historic place, incredible experience, incredibly creative, but all the while still teaching yoga. So then you kind of fast forward. Then I left GeoCities when we merged with Yahoo in 1999, kind of fast forward to 2008. And I'd been doing this sort of mishmash of teaching and contract work. And I kind of started to think, what would it be like if I just had one job with the same people, and make a contribution to a thing? And so I ended up getting hired at Kelley Blue Book to start the UX research function. They have market research, but no UX research. And from there, I went to Edmunds, where I started the research function, and then I went to NerdWallet. So for 14 years, I ended up leading these teams at these companies. And then in 2022, I went out on my own. I started a consultancy focused on coaching and training to help people in UX, with their careers. And I did that for 3 years until fast forward to the end of this past year, 2025. I retired from tech completely. And that's when I went back to teaching yoga now full time. And, all of those transitions included a period of sort of really reflection and like discerning what is the next thing to do and some experimentation, like try a thing, it doesn't work, try something else.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for walking us through that journey. I'm curious because you mentioned like you went through this phase where what would it be like to do one thing and not have like these two parts? Did you ever feel like dissonance or torn in some ways because you were spending time doing yoga, but then also in the world of tech, which are very different, like if you think energetically about those spaces?
Totally. And I think the thing, the thread, the through line is that it was me doing it. So, like the way I was teaching yoga, I was teaching at a community college and then eventually at Loyola Marymount University, and I developed a semester long comprehensive program. And so it wasn't like for some people, their personalities are much more suited to like teaching a yoga class on the beach or something. And that was never my approach because I was kind of like, there are other people that are better suited to that. I'm really a better match for this kind of more structured environment. And so in one way, it wasn't. I think another through line is that they're both very creative endeavors because doing contract work, you're constantly going into an environment. You have to listen, you have to understand quickly what they need, you have to produce something. And then also in teaching in a university and in these colleges, like, there's a certain amount of like always with teaching, like listening for and looking and listening. It's the same thing I advise people about research: observe and listen and respond from there. So there's sort of a through line there that I managed to find based just on who I am and my UX background. And then, but they are very different. The goals are different. I think that because I was contracting, I didn't have the same level of investment that you have when you have a full-time job. The dissonance there, so there was dissonance there for sure. Really, once I started working full-time and I stopped teaching, I felt like I'd cut off my arm. I mean, that was way harder than I thought it was going to be because I thought, oh, I'm in these environments already. These people are really nice. It wasn't about the place. It was just the dramatic shift. And there were other things too, like it was a long commute and so there was a really dramatic shift there that was really hard. And there was a lot of emotional component to that I hadn't anticipated. And even though I thought it through and I knew it was time to get this one job, and I think it was a really great opportunity and that was all true, it was still pretty hard.
Yeah. What made you stop teaching at that point? Was it just like time-wise because you were fully in full-time work?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't really possible in the way that I was teaching to continue. I thought about it, and like I had a class, these classes like throughout the day at ONU, and I thought, well, maybe I can teach the 8 a.m. And if it had been like no commute, that might have been easier under different circumstances, but like I wouldn't have gotten to work until like 11 or something. It just wasn't feasible. So that was why.
Yeah. It's almost like if we had remote like we did during COVID or anything like that, it would have been easier, but it was the days of everything in person,
It was
yeah.
those days. It was definitely those days. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you start your journey with yoga? I know you did the master's program in movement. Was it kind of like a natural next step for you, or yeah, how did that kind of manifest?
Yeah, it kind of started. I actually started the yoga a bit before I went into the dance program. So I started practicing yoga in 1991. And at that point, it wasn't really as popular, right? Just like tech wasn't as popular when I kind of got into it. And I was taking these dance aerobics classes, a studio in West Hollywood. And some friends said, come to the yoga class. And our aerobics teacher was on vacation. And I was like, no, I'm going to do yoga when I'm 50. I was like 32 or something. And that 50 seemed really old, which is very funny to me now. But I got to the class and it was like in a heated room and it was taught by this guy, Baron Baptiste, who's now a very famous yoga teacher for like more power moves, and there were celebrities. I mean, it was just like this whole LA experience. He was like selling t-shirts during class. It was kind of wild, but I could tell because I had been studying dance, like a lot of different dance forms before that. And I could tell this is different. Like this somehow, this movement experience is fundamentally different from anything I've ever done. And so I started searching for what to me seemed like it might be a more serious yoga practice. And I ended up at a different studios. And then at some point, well, it was like 1997, I met I met a bunch actually of the teachers in the Deshkachar tradition. And he's not very well known. Most people know like BKS Iyengar in this country or Joyce, who founded the Ashtanga Vinyasa system. But Deshkachar was one of their peer. He's a peer to those two people. And so it's a very comprehensive approach. It's postures, breathing, meditation, chanting, yoga philosophy. And so I felt like I'd found my home. Yoga went from being this like very specific thing to this like immense landscape of things. And so I did a teacher training with one of the teachers within that tradition and studied with her for 5 years. And then I also started to study yoga philosophy more deeply and Sanskrit, took a year of college Sanskrit with Professor Chris Chappell from LMU, who has become a very dear friend over years. He and his wife, in fact, he and his wife married my husband and I. And so along the way, I started teaching yoga because having a master's in dance gave me the credentials to teach yoga at community colleges. And so eventually I taught at LMU and like I was saying, I created this semester long program. And then while I was at LMU, Chris and I founded Yoga Studies within the extension division that ended up becoming like now they have certificates in all these different things, including 300 hours in yoga therapy, and a master's in yoga. And so that's what happened there. And then when I started, like I was saying, when I started doing tech again full time, I didn't really teach very much. And then I'd get invited to teach something here or there, and it felt good, but I couldn't really jump in. So then I started to think a little bit more, like, what am I going to do when I retire from tech? I'm not going to just do nothing. Then I started to contemplate that. And then there was a whole series of things that led to teaching now from there.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because you mentioned your first inclination when you first went into yoga was like, "Oh, I'll do this when I'm older." And I had a very similar moment with coaching. I was having a conversation with my husband. I was like, "Oh, that's my retirement plan." And he like slowed me down. He was just like, "What are you talking about? Why can't you do it now? Like you're 29. I don't get it." And so that was like a big ha that opened a door for myself. And it sounds like it opened a door for you of like, "Oh, I can do this right now." And get it started. It doesn't need to be put off until later.
Yeah. And I think because I was so like in that moment, like I've just been writing a little bit. I've been thinking about this. I had this persona of myself at that point, the fit girl in the fast car, like driving around LA and taking these aerobics classes and blah, blah, blah. And so that's where like yoga seemed like this thing where you sit and meditate, which it is, but it's also a very physical practice. And I think if it hadn't been that kind of practice at that time, I would have rejected it. Like, there's no way I would have been happy doing what I do now at that point in my life. It came later.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
So I
absolutely.
guess realizing there are different forms of things, like coaching doesn't mean one thing, yoga doesn't mean one thing.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's so fascinating because my own personal experience with yoga, I actually took my first class in higher ed. It's when I went to undergrad for college and I took a power yoga class. That's how it was introduced to me as well. And it wasn't until later that I was introduced to different types of classes and stuff like that. And I don't think you could pay me to do a power yoga class at this point in my life. Like, I want some yoga nidra or something else, but
Yeah.
very much like calm and relaxing. And so I'm curious you mentioned that you've transitioned to it now after retiring from tech. What led you to retire from tech? What led you to make this transition?
I think there were like two things. One, you know, I'm in the age group where people start to retire. So that was sort of like, I always sort of had in mind, like, there's going to be a transition to something else when I get to this point in my life. But I'm not in the age group where people just stop doing everything, right? I still have a brain, I can still move. So as I was sort of still at my last full-time job, I just started thinking, I wonder what that thing is that I want to do. And I kind of keep notebooks. This is my yoga room as well as my office. And I keep these like whiteboards and I just write stuff on them to kind of be looking at it and reflecting on it. And I wrote on it one day, teach movement to seniors. it's like, oh, what is that going to be? That's interesting, and I started taking like eccentrics classes during the pandemic and online, and maybe that's it. Maybe this is it. But I couldn't quite, there's no way I thought I was going to go back to teaching yoga because, first of all, like, obviously I wasn't going to go teach college students again. And secondly, there are a gazillion yoga teachers now. And so it's like, I just felt like, what is my new niche? How do I differentiate myself if I'm going to do that? And then as I'm sort of just still figuring this out, and I, left my full-time role and I'm doing my consulting, I got a cancer diagnosis. And so that catapulted, and I had surgery and now I'm well, and the cancer has not returned, and so that's good, of course. But the whole thing just sort of catapulted to the front of my mind, like, okay, what do I want to do? Like, and that was also right around the time that all the people started getting laid off in tech, and the whole landscape shifted there. And so I think those things happened at the same time as I'm getting into my 60s, and I'm like, what do I want to do now? And so then it was like, well, what if I taught yoga again? After I started recovering from surgery, I just started doing experiments. I thought, I think, what if I want to go through a yoga therapy program so that I can help people that have just been through something like what I'm doing, like help
Yeah.
people recover breathing after they've had lung surgery or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I yoga therapy myself. I didn't know who to go to for that, even though I have friends that are yoga therapists. There was too much going on, So I just started experimenting. I just invited friends and family to a couple of classes on Zoom and one here in the living room, and let's just try some stuff. Let me see how I feel. And it felt good to do it again, and I got good feedback. I was still recovering from this major thing, so it took a while to kind of it took a full year after that before I felt like I was actually ready to do it. And then I've been studying for over 20 years with this contemplative teacher named James Finley, who's on the core faculty of the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is this amazing organization in Albuquerque that's doing really wonderful work. And he offers an online retreat in December. And so I was invited to teach. I think like they had somebody else lined up and they couldn't do it. So I was invited to teach as part of this online retreat. And then it started to get me going. And then they had an in-person retreat in Albuquerque. They invited me to go to Albuquerque last fall.
Wow.
And then there was Jim did another online thing in December. So it's like, okay, now I am doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the end of the year was a great time for me to just say, okay, I'm going to retire from tech. And now I'm doing this other thing. And so, but I sort of sorted through it, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I took a couple of yoga therapy courses. It's like really valuable to have that knowledge, but my brain is not like the biomedical model is deep and anatomical understanding. My brain just doesn't do that. It's much more about the spiritual element for me, and breathing and moving in sync and getting that going. And so
It's more about the
that's where I
somatics, it
landed.
sounds like.
Yeah, that's where I've landed.
Amazing. I'm curious. It sounds like it was something that came out of your personal experience and then it grew over the last year through really serendipity, given these opportunities and taking advantage of them and them now making the leap. I'm curious, how is your practice operating now? Like are you serving, I think you said it was you wanted to work with senior citizens and movement. Is that where your practice has landed or has it shifted from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been really amazing. I haven't been specifically targeting any demographic because I think it was my first thought. But what's been happening is that because I've been given an opportunity to work with this organization that's very much about contemplative going inward so you can go out and take action that's appropriate and valuable to the community kind of thing. I've been sort of in sync with that community. And when I announced, it's really interesting, when I announced that I was retiring from tech and that I was going to teach yoga, people started coming, like just on LinkedIn
Yeah,
from
yeah.
my past. And so I've got now, like, one of my clients is somebody that I worked with 30 years ago at Xerox, who
Wow.
it's just the relationship, is
Yeah.
really what connects us people, me with whoever. So when I think about who I want to be working with, it's somebody that I feel I can help, who I feel comfortable with, and who feels comfortable with me, and the realm, like scope of practice, the realm of what they're looking for is within my sphere of practice. So
Yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
than like a specific age group or a
Absolutely.
specific, anything really. It's just, can I do what they want? And do we feel good about working with each other?
Yeah, yeah. Do you primarily teach online or do you do in-person work as well?
It primarily online. I mean, I've started, I do some events in person and I may do some like special workshops or something as the year unfolds. Like I just announced I'm doing a Slow Art Day event. And Slow Art Day is this like annual global event to look at art more slowly. And so it's more of a contemplative way of going to a museum and spending like 10 minutes with one painting and then go to another place, another one, and spend or whatever, a piece of art, sculpture, whatever. And yeah, so I'm going to do that again. I've hosted that before. So things that are sort of yoga adjacent, but within the contemplative realm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, I teach online to get to
Yeah.
your first question. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious with the transition, has there been any surprises or things that you didn't expect that have come up for you?
I think the biggest surprise is that, like, somebody that I worked with 30 years ago wants me as your yoga teacher now.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's really, I know for me, it's very deeply about relationship with whoever I'm learning from and studying from. And I've been really fortunate to have long learning relationships with these amazing teachers, and yeah, Adeshkachar used to say yoga is relationship, and that's kind of the way I was
Mm.
taught. And it really is. It's like, yeah, so that's been the biggest surprise. It's like, who is coming forward? I mean, people that I taught at LMU 20 years ago have reached out and said, hey, let's chat about maybe it's time to do something. I thought I'd have to start from scratch, but I have really great relationships with a bunch of people that I hadn't thought about in a long time. And some of those people are coming forward.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the being in relationship. I actually, part of my own journey, I started first with Reiki and then I did MBSR training, which is very similar to what you're talking about in terms of like the structure of the program. And I remember I was teaching like a class and I was like, I love doing this, but I hate sitting in silence with people. Like, it's like I'm introduced, like, they're paying to sit in silence with me. I want to be more in relation to them. And so that's where my transition into coaching kind of came out of. But it is so true. It's like all of these modalities, you are always in relationship with someone else. It just varies in the different ways. And so even when you were doing consulting, you were still in relationship. And then now you're doing
Totally.
yoga teaching. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And I just felt like when I was coaching, not so much with like group training, because then you work with the people that need you. But when I was coaching one on one, and I mean, I imagine you probably find this too. It's like I only took people that I really felt like we have some kind of connection, because otherwise, how is this going to work? How are they going to get anything out of it if there isn't some foundational rapport pretty quickly, So I was always happy to, like, everybody's got different models of the way that they get clients. And I was always happy to just have a like complimentary 30-minute call with somebody, because I want to know if this is going to work before they start paying me. And I want them to feel confident that it's going to work.
Absolutely. For your yoga practice now, do you do like intro calls with folks who may be interested in working with you?
I do. I do the same thing I did with the coaching. We have a 30-minute call. I want to understand what they need, make sure I can help them. And then I ask people to commit to 4 1-hour sessions out the gate, because I don't think you can, I don't feel comfortable just saying, come for an hour and do a thing and then go away. And I don't know
Yeah.
what impact that has had for you. Are you doing it every day, or are you never doing it again? Or did it, like, I have no idea. And so I feel like we need a few hours to actually get somewhere. And then
Mhm.
after the 4 hours of sessions, which we do within a month or two, then if you want to come back for one, great. If you want another four, great. And I don't have enough numbers yet to know how that's gonna work for everybody. So far, it's working, for the client that I've had for a couple months.
Yeah, it sounds really personalized. It's almost like when I started in yoga, I wish that's what I had, so I could get the personalized experience, the tailoring, like, I'd be able to get some of the corrections versus so much of yoga, at least in studios and classes, it's usually group format is what you're going
Yeah.
to.
And I mean, I've certainly done and taught hours and hours and hours of group and taken so many classes in so many studios. And I mean, I've just had my own personal practice for a very, very long time. It shifts over time.
Yeah.
But that's actually the emphasis in the way that I was taught when I did teacher training, and the person that I worked with as my primary yoga teacher at that time, the emphasis was on personal practice. And I was almost an anomaly because I was teaching these college students in terms of the people that were in my training and what we were doing. I find it incredibly valuable. And a lot of people don't feel like they can do a personal practice because it seems daunting or whatever. But I mean, it's like I'm sure you learned in MBSR. It's like if you just do this thing for 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be you don't have to just sit in meditation for 25 minutes twice a day. You can
Yeah, yeah.
like do something for 10 minutes. And so it's really yeah, I think it's really valuable for people to kind of think about that a little bit, like, because it seems daunting because it seems like too much.
Yeah, I think that people have assumptions, like, when they hear mindfulness or even yoga, it's that what comes to mind almost is like, "Oh, well, I'm not a monk. I don't sit in silence for retreats and all these things." It's like they go to the extreme of it when it's like, no, if you think about mindfulness, it's really about just being in the moment and the breath and connecting with the breath. Same thing with yoga. It's like, how do you connect with the breath and move? And it could be like you're just doing some stretches or some poses, or you could do like the intense power yoga for whatever many hours, but it doesn't need to be the extreme that we assume it is.
And I think also one of the things that I had to learn because I didn't know is that yoga really initially, like, people kind of go, oh, yoga's thousands of years old. Yeah, but thousands of years ago they were sitting, like,
Yeah.
they weren't doing primary series. It's like
Yeah.
some of these things evolved over time. I mean, it's like we have evidence from caves 3,500 years ago that people were in a seated posture. And the word asana, like when you go to class, it's like Bhujangasana, Trikonasana, da da da, right? That word asana means to sit. And so even in like the Yoga Sutra, which is 2,000 years old, there are only three of these 200 phrases that talk about asana. It's ethical practice, it's doing some postures. And the way they talk about posture is steadiness and ease, and mastery comes from relaxation of effort. It's not about sticking your foot behind your hip at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it is now, of course, if that's your practice, great. But when we talk about it being really old, you know, tradition, I don't know that people were doing that then. Later, not then.
Yeah. 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 I'm curious because you have so much rich experience in this. I'm sure we have some listeners who have no experience with yoga, no practice with it. What would you tell someone who would be looking to get started with it for the first time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I kind of think, like anything else that you're going to embark on, like, I think it helps to have an idea what you're trying to get out of it. So, if what you want is exercise and a workout, then that's going to lead you to certain kinds of yoga practice. If what you want is to have more of a contemplative experience, that's going to lead you to different kinds of practice. If you have medical issues or a specific issue and you believe that yoga can help you because, either your primary care provider or your friend or somebody told you try yoga, that's going to lead you to a different kind of practice. So I think that if you can think about what you are trying to get out of it, and if you have no idea, just go try a beginner class.
Yeah.
But if you have some idea, then at least you can start to narrow it so that if you go to the studio down the street, you can tell them this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. And now, of course, you can look online and see so much about the different environments that you might end up in or private teachers or whatever. I'm sure you're going to have to experiment a little bit. It's very rare that out the gate you're going to find the greatest fit. But as you experiment, you'll start to learn what works for you and what doesn't, right? And then once you get to the right place, then you can really see. I think realizing, I just want to add one thing because I just said, your doctor might tell you to go to yoga. I hear that all the time. And they're not, unless you have a primary care provider or whoever the specialist or somebody is, they have deep understanding of different kinds of yoga. They're not going to know either.
Yeah.
So it's worth poking around on the internet or getting referrals to somebody that can really, is the right person for you. Like somebody came up to me after the conference in Albuquerque and said, well, I have this fill in the blank medical problem. And my daughter told me I should try this yoga therapy. And I was like, can you help me? And I said, that could very well help you, but I am not the person. And so I actually just went in my network and found her some yoga therapists that specialize in that issue, right? So you might have to just even get a referral from somebody that you think is maybe going to be your yoga teacher and it ends up being someone else.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is like one, reflecting on why yoga, why now, what you're looking to get out of it. And then two is experiment and be open. So dip your toe in the water, you'll get something from that. And then maybe you shift to a new person or practice that you're working underneath. But yeah, just continuously trying to experiment and see what fits for you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like you can't think your way into it too much.
Yeah.
I mean, a
Yeah, you
little
have to
bit, to
feel.
get you started. And then there's this back and forth, right? Like you have the experience and then you think about it, the experience and you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure listeners have too. How can they get in touch with you or reach out if they'd like to?
Yeah, my website is Lobey Movement, Lobey. And so that's probably the way you can get the best overview of what I'm doing. I'm on Instagram at Lobey_movement. I'm on Facebook, Lobey Movement. And of course, I'm still on LinkedIn. And so can't leave LinkedIn. It's still at C Rossi UX. I haven't changed from UX to some other name,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's
Not yet. Not yet.
not yet. I will eventually. And if I make it Lobey, nobody will know what that is. I need my name in there somewhere. I'll figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining today. So lucky to have you here with us.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation too. And it's great to be a part of this. I love that you're doing this series.
Thanks for being here. If something in this episode landed with you, feel free to pass it along to someone who might need it too. You can leave a review, subscribe, or just keep tuning in. We're figuring it out together. And remember, your story, your voice, your becoming, it all matters.